Yo YouTube, GK's back and the moment has arrived. The Game Awards has posted their nominees, so we're gonna start voting.
Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show. Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show. Yo, Grown Kid Talk Show. Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show.
Best Action Adventure Game.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Ghost of Tsushima, Marvel's Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and The Last of Us Part 2.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I am currently playing and I am doing review on. So when you hear action and adventure, The Last of Us Part 2 doesn't necessarily come to mind. You do think Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and Ghost. I will actually give that to Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima was that game, is that game, and I'll be surprised to find a game that could beat this in any category. It was really that good, and the adventure part of Ghost of Tsushima was one of the best aspects. Innovation in accessibility.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Grounded, Hyperdot, The Last of Us Part 2, and Watch Dogs Legion.
What does that mean? Recognizing software and or hardware that is pushing the medium forward by adding features, technology, and content to help games be played and enjoyed by an even wider audience? So you created a category for The Last of Us Part 2 to fucking win? Are you fucking kidding me? What is this category? Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Okay. What has Assassin's Creed innovated? What? Why is that even in the fucking category? Grounded. Okay. Like that movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Okay. Hyperbot. The Last of Us Part 2. Watch Dogs Legion. So a bunch of M-rated games. And you're talking about accessibility. M-rated. Kids can't play it. Parents don't want kids to play it. The Last of Us. Parents don't want kids to play it. Kids can't play it. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. M-rated. What part of accessible are any of those M-rated titles right there? Please tell me. I'm confused. If you know about this fucking category, please tell me what they were intending to do, because it sounds like I really want to give The Last of Us Part 2 a fucking award here. But if we're talking about innovation and creativity, which is innovation, and accessibility means a wide range of audiences can play it without a limitation. It would be the game Grounded, even though the game Grounded doesn't compare at all to an Assassin's Creed Valhalla, The Last of Us, or Watch Dogs Legion, right? It's just not the same vein of game. It's not as good if you're talking about gaming. I give Last of Us credit. It's an okay game. It's just a terrible sequel. No, it's just trash. It's trash. It looks good. It's okay, I guess. It's just fucking trash though, right? But it's still better than Grounded if we're talking and being objective here. What the fuck is this category? I'm going to go with Grounded because that has innovation there and it has the accessibility part. It meets both of the qualifications for this category. The other M-rated games on here do not. And I swear, if The Last of Us fucking Part 2 wins this category, I'm going to lose my shit even more. Best performance. We have
Ashley Johnson as Ellie, The Last of Us Part 2. Laura Bailey as Abby, The Last of Us Part 2. Daisuke Fujii as Jin Sakai, Ghost of Tsushima. Logan Cunningham as Hades in Hades. And Najee Jeter as Miles Morales in Marvel's Spider-Man, Miles Morales.
I do feel like Jin's VA did very good, but I do think people thought he was a little flat. I thought he was perfect for the world because given the time period. Now, Spider-Man Miles Morales. Glad it was nominated. I really do think it's a dope character and the VA really fucking fits. I'm going to pose a question before I vote. There's a new problem with The Last of Us. How can you give it to one and not the other? As in, both of the characters do exactly the same thing for most of the fucking game. I'm talking about the game objectively. Ellie and Abby, they're mirrors of each other. They do the same shit in the game. They go to a museum, they go to an aquarium. That's just one example. So I don't know how either one of them can win the category. Again, you might just think I'm hating, but I don't know how you pick one or the other there. Their VAs are good. The characters they play or whatever, that's not the point of the category, it's the voice actor. No, Ashley Johnson's a stud. Laura Bailey is dope. The problem is this a makeup award for Ashley Johnson? is this award for Ashley Johnson because of her work on The Last of Us 1 and The Last of Us 2, whereas Laura Bailey has only worked on The Last of Us 2, right? Is that how you're going to vote? Well, then that's not in the spirit of voting for this year's best performance game. So in the spirit of actually voting fairly, unlike obviously some of these nominees from these fucking critics, I don't know how you justify picking Ashley or Laura. I don't see it. So by that logic, even though I do think Jin is a better character than critics say, I'm going to go with Miles Morales. I do believe that the character itself is more innovative and more impactful of a performance than the case you can make for picking either Ellie or Abby. I won't feel good about picking either one because they're both the same. I have to go with Spider-Man Miles Morales here. Best audio design.
Doom Eternal, Half-Life Alyx, Ghost of Tsushima, Resident Evil 3, and The Last of Us Part 2.
Well, this is fucking easy. That's going to Ghost of Tsushima. It's not even a question. Yeah, The Last of Us 2 had great music, let me not get it confused, but they didn't play the music enough. Ghost of Tsushima will have your ears literally coming from the fucking music. Best score and music.
Doom Eternal, composed by Nick Gordon. Final Fantasy VII Remake, composed by Nobuo Uematsu, Masashi Hamauzu, and Mitsuko Suzuki. Hades, composed by Darren Korb. Ori and the Will of the Wisps, composed by Gareth Coker. And The Last of Us Part 2, composed by Gustavo Santaolalla. Additional music by Matt Quay.
Again, you guys want to call it Last of Us hate, call it what you want. I'm going to pose a question again. Do you know a theme from The Last of Us Part 2 like you know Sephiroth's fucking theme from Final Fantasy VII? No, you don't. And you'd be lying to yourself if you said yes to that question. Be real. The Final Fantasy VII Remake has better score and music. It just does. And why it does is because the score and music fits the game's world. The world of the game is allowed to have and play with score and music. The Last of Us world itself, outside of the guitar, music plays no role. It doesn't have a purpose. It is literally background music, where the game, the music and the score of the Final Fantasy VII world is part of it. People play their radios. You have the battle theme. That is something that Final Fantasy games do, the battle theme, right? It is intrinsically involved in a Final Fantasy VII game. The Last of Us Part 2, outside of the guitar, which I can argue was fucking annoying at times because I'm supposed to be worried about clickers and shit, but I'm gonna just sit and strum my fucking guitar and serenade my girlfriend every 2 seconds. Okay. You know, now that's just me knocking the game, but I hope you got my previous argument that the music is intrinsically involved in Final Fantasy VII Remake and therefore wins the vote. Best art direction.
Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima, Hades, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and The Last of Us Part 2.
I do think that the art and world design as a whole, it would be Ghost of Tsushima. However, I did say this last year, a lot of people think art is just pen and paper, and I'm not going to critique that. I'm just saying, if you go by that logic, you'd give it to Hades because of the style of the game that's on this list. But in terms of art, the construction of the world, the buildings, the trees, the art of the fucking game, Ghost of Tsushima wins that. It's just a little bit better than Final Fantasy VII's world right now. But Final Fantasy VII will expand and get bigger, and it won't just be one city, and then we'll have the debate again. Best narrative.
Aegis Rim, written by George Kamatani. Final Fantasy VII Remake, written by Kazushige Nojima, Otomo Toriyama, Hiroki Awaki, and Sashi Harano. Ghost of Tsushima, writers Ian Ryan, Liz Abel, Patrick Downs, and Jordan Ramos. Hades, writer Craig Casada. And The Last of Us Part 2, writers Neil Druckmann and Haley Grant.
The worst part of The Last of Us Part 2 is the narrative. The worst part. With the worst part of The Last of Us Part 2 being the actual narrative and how they tell their story, we're going to be voting for something else. Again, you can call this a I hate The Last of Us video all you want, but I'm hopefully giving you reasons and breakdowns and analogies and questions to at least defend my position, right? So in terms of the narrative, I don't think that anything beats Ghost of Tsushima's narrative. Why? Because the story is just so good. The inner turmoil, the way it's portrayed, the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake, I took issue with. The plot ghosts, I really don't like them. I think they could have wanted to do without them. That's my opinion on that. You know, that's why the game isn't as great to me. I wanted it to be, even though I'm leaving room for improvement. And the worst part of The Last of Us Part 2 is the fucking narrative. Another one of those, I don't think you can justify picking something else, because if you can honestly explain the plot ghost and explain the story of The Last of Us Part 2 and be like, oh yeah, that's really fucking good. Oh, that's really clever. I really think you're lying to yourself. Best game direction.
Final Fantasy VII Remake from Square Enix. Ghost of Tsushima from Sucker Punch Productions. Hades from Supergiant Games. Half-Life Alyx from Valve. And The Last of Us Part 2 from Naughty Dog.
Remaking the Final Fantasy VII game took a shit ton of direction. It took a shit ton of foresight, and even though I disagree with the plot ghosts, I understand their purpose, I know what they do, and I get it. I'm just saying that took a lot of direction to do. Another problem with The Last of Us Part 2 is that it lacked real direction. Real, meaningful direction. The Last of Us Part 2 was just a hogposh of cutscenes and flashbacks and shock value. It wasn't directed. There was no path. If anything, it's an example of oblong paths, forks in the road, parallel stories. It wasn't a direction. That's not what The Last of Us 2 was. It took a chance on that direction, the directions it went, but it didn't succeed at that. We can give credit for the effort, but we can't reward for failing. Final Fantasy VII Remake does have the direction. You could call it linear if you want. That's okay. But linear does not mean bad. In the case of Final Fantasy 13, it does. But not in the case of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Game of the year, we have arrived. We have arrived. We have arrived. Doom Eternal, what the fuck are you doing here? Final Fantasy VII Remake, I'm glad you made the nominee. Ghost of Tsushima, you should be here. Hades, I don't know what the fuck you're doing here. Animal Crossing, New Horizons, I definitely don't know what the fuck you're doing here. And The Last of Us Part 2, we all know why you're here, because Naughty Dog paid for you to be here. Now, even though I said that Cyberpunk would beat out Ghost of Tsushima for Game of the Year, Cyberpunk didn't make this list. If it did, it'd be no question that Cyberpunk would probably win. I made a video on why Final Fantasy VII can't win Game of the Year. Well, I was going to make a video on why The Last of Us Part 2 shouldn't and can't win Game of the Year. The only choice for Game of the Year this year, logically to me, in my opinion, which has been this whole video, Ghost of Tsushima. It was fantastic. I don't care what some of the other critics said about it. They played this before. I want you to know that those same critics who said we've played this before, they are not saying that about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now let's talk about why this may not happen. For one, critics loved The Last of Us Part 2. They sucked off that game's no dick having ass like you wouldn't believe. A lot of fake ass people writing fake ass reviews about that game. Number two, there is 50% of the Last of Us fans who do like the game and will make excuses for it. Number three, it is progressive, meaning that it took chances where other games won't in terms of its narrative storytelling and its character choices. I am all for representation. I just think they represented everything poorly. Ghost of Tsushima should win because it has an engrossing story, a fascinatingly open, packed full world. It has characters who you will start to adore, and sad moments. Great music that you'll just love to hear while you're roaming. And by the way, it now has multiplayer. A game that nobody thought that would have multiplayer has multiplayer before The Last of Us Part 2, which came out and said that it would have multiplayer. That is a game of the year. A game of the year says what it's going to do, does it, and then exceeds our expectations. A game of the year doesn't nickel dime its fans, delay itself a bunch of the times, take away its multiplayer factions mode that held up its game, and it's not divisive in a negatively shock value type of way. A game of the year should be a representation of what kind of game you would want to be. I don't believe many people besides Dr. Uckman, the most pretentious prick in all of gaming, is what other developers want to be. I ask that we don't reward The Last of Us Part 2 for what it did. Let's talk about what it didn't do. Ghost of Tsushima is the game of the year. I know I talk a lot. I know I ramble. I fucking ranted. I'm the grown kid, and I catch you back in another video.